Hello and welcome to this special World Cup webinar in conjunction with the Coaching Manual. I'm John and I'm the co-founder of InspireCoachEd.com and I'll be your host for the next 20 minutes. So today's theme is England and penalties. And I'm joined by three panelists today. So we've got Paul Bright and Lee Fletcher from the Coaching Manual and Ben Lyttleton. So Paul, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, John. My name's Paul Bright. I'm the technical director for the Coaching Manual, UEFA licensed coach, worked as academy manager, academy coach, director of coaching in the UK and also now in the US.
Okay, Lee?
Yeah, my name's Lee Fletcher. I'm currently collaborating with the Coaching Manual on their technical and tactical content. Worked in different Premier League clubs, a couple of Premier League clubs back in the UK. Worked with a La Liga club, producing a coaching curriculum, which is to learn English through soccer coaching and soccer training, should I say. And currently working at university now with our objective to reach the highest possible pyramid we can within the Football League in Spain. Yeah.
Okay, and Ben.
Hello there, my name is Ben Lyttleton. I'm the author of 12 Yards, The Art and Psychology of the Perfect Penalty. And I also wrote a book called Edge, Leadership Secrets from Football's Top Thinkers.
Fantastic, thank you for joining us. Lee, Paul and Ben, I know you've been watching the England-Colombia game back several times. So Paul and Lee, what were your observations from the game?
Yeah, we watched the game back a number of times. It wasn't our most convincing performance of the tournament, but it's definitely job done. And I think the topic around England and penalties is, to use the cliche, getting the monkey off our back. You know, what a psychological edge the resulting penalty shootout win will give Southgate's squad, a squad of young players who stepped up and showed that maturity to deal with that pressure. But in terms of the approach and in terms of the shape, I think, you know, Southgate's sticking to his plan. He's got his back three who he trusts and knows. He's got his keeper who he trusts and knows. He's gone the 5 and the 2 as well. He's showing faith in the players. It was a bit of an edgy game. Obviously, we got the penalty, and deservedly so as well. And I think also Colombia with the header off the set piece. You could argue the last 20 or 30 minutes they probably deserved as well. But we're going to go into some of the shape stuff as well for the upcoming game. But Lee, your thoughts on the performance in Colombia?
Yeah, I thought they did okay, if I'm honest with you, and I think they showed tremendous resilience towards the end of the game. Obviously, going down a goal, especially in the 90th minute, and we've seen that with other games, especially in Champions League final, Atletico, where they're conceding in the last minute of the game, and then the extra time they kind of crumble. But I think the team showed, like I said, resilience to kind of battle through that in the extra time, and then go on from there and win the penalty shootout. Like Paul said, I don't think it was our greatest performance. I thought we should have retained ball a little bit better, but I think overall, I think we did quite well. And again, echoing what Paul said, the penalties were a massive, massive thing for us. And you know, I don't know how many times we've lost on penalties, but more times than I'd wish to remember. So yeah, I thought we did okay.
Ben, do you have a stat there for how many times they've failed on penalties?
Of course I do. Before this week, we'd lost 6 out of 7 shootouts, which is a win percentage of 14%. It's the worst shootout record of any major country that's played more than 3 shootouts in tournament football. So really, really appalling. And for me, what was so exciting about seeing the penalty success was that it was just a vindication of all Gareth Southgate's methods for the last 6 months. And every coach that England have had in the past, every time we've lost one of those 6 shootouts, the coach has said penalties are a lottery and you can't practice for them. And what Southgate said even before this shootout was, we have been practicing for penalties, because penalties are a skill that you perform under pressure, and you can actually practice that just as golfers practice their putting before a Ryder Cup, or Andy Murray would practice his second serve before he was playing at Wimbledon. This is an isolated element of football that becomes an individual sport rather than a team sport, and therefore you can practice it and train it. So even if England had lost on penalties, and there was a chance because the Colombian player hit the crossbar, if he'd have got it 2 inches lower, it would have gone in, and who knows what would have happened. I still think there's a huge positive to take from the whole campaign, which is simply that we have an England coach who is taking penalties seriously and saying it is not a lottery.
I think I'd like to add on the back of that from Ben as well, is that It's second-hand information. I was told this by a friend, and I shared this with Paul, is that I don't know if it's true or not, but it sounds extremely interesting. It sounds actually accurate to what we saw the other day, where in training, apparently Southgate has been telling the goalkeeper where the penalty taker is going to be taking the penalty. So if the left side, the right side, top corner, bottom corner, and the keeper knows this information, but it's down to the technical qualities of a player to kind of put that penalty away, even knowing the goalkeeper knowing what side he's going to. And I think it just echoes what Ben just said there, where it becomes a technical practice rather than actually a psychological practice. So I think it's been really interesting. That's credit again to Southgate and the coaching team.
Brilliant. We'll return to penalties in a moment. So Paul, I know you put some images together based on the Colombia match with England.
We've looked at the shape of England for the last few games, really, and then we're looking at the shape potentially against Sweden. And myself and Lee discussed this at length this morning. Sweden, can you guys see that image okay? Just before we begin, yeah. So Sweden are going to line up in a 4-4-2. That's their staple. That's their shape. And looking at how Southgate's players have lined up in that 3-5-2, if you can see, it's man for man in the final third, and it's man for man across the midfield. And what we're asking of Jordan Henderson, who is potentially the free man, is to find those penetrating passes, and those passes when players are locked off. Even if Trippier, decides to advance, or Ashley Young decide to advance if they start, they've got picked up off second men in here as well. Is Jordan Henderson well suited to play that role? Jordan Henderson has played a magnificent role, in my opinion, for England so far in this tournament, but is he suited to finding those killer passes? It's clear and absolutely evident that England and Southgate have done their homework, and his coaching team, because you look at the number of runs in behind the line of pressure, and it's not just the front two, it's not just Kane and Sterling, it's players from wide areas in behind the line of pressure, and there's consistent and constant runs in behind that line. However, myself and Lee have both analysed Sweden and their last few games. I was watching the Korea game again this morning. They're going to sit with a medium or low block, which means there's probably not going to be that much space between the lines and in behind the line of pressure. So this, Lee, do you want to just add to the conversations we had around this shape?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a concern for me and Paul about seeing this shape again in terms of what it might do, and exactly what Paul said, where it adds man for man across the midfield and only allowing really Jordan Henderson to find those passes. Another concern that we had is that is heavy reliance then on the free man at the back. So obviously playing with a back three, the left or the right centre back, or even John Stones through the middle, need to drive out and try and find space, beyond the initial line of pressure of the front two, and then it's still about, can we find those passes? So there has to be a lot of movement if Southgate does decide to go for this shape. So movement from Sterling in between the lines, but still they can afford to maybe have one player come and maybe engage with Sterling in higher up the field, because they still have 3 men at the back to try and deal with Harry Kane. So it's a tough ask, really, in my opinion. I said to you guys before, and even to Paul, is that Sweden and all pushovers, it's going to be a lot tougher than what we expect, if I'm honest with you.
One thing we did look at as well is a potential shift in shape, and again, this is all ifs, buts, and maybes, right? But these are the conversations what are now being had up and down the country, thanks to Southgate and his belief. And we looked at a potential 3-4-3. What that would mean is possibly, and again, it's pub talk. It's what's your starting 11. But by adding Marcus Rashford into that front line in a 3. Dele Alli would lose his place, in our opinion, but we don't get paid to make those decisions. Now we've got players who can find the pockets in here. What we've also got is Raheem Sterling, who can potentially take wider positions, allowing Trippier to come inside, or come inside and allow Trippier to go on the outside, creating 2v1s. And what we've seen best from Raheem Sterling for Manchester City is when he is in those real wide positions, stretching back lines and driving inside. We spoke about it before we went on air. There was a run what Raheem Sterling did in the Colombia game where he danced from a wide area, received, drove inside past 2 Colombia players, and then it became congested. And I believe the reason why Raheem Sterling may not have had the success he's had at club level so far in the tournament is because this area of the pitch is being congested. Raheem Sterling, Dele Alli, Jesse Lingard taking up similar positions. So we believe a 3-4-3 may just allow us to get in there. And again, Trippier's played as a wing back, so if Sweden are on the attack with numbers, he would be comfortable dropping in. Same with Ashley Young with Manchester United, comfortable dropping in those left-back areas, because we talked about possibly Ruben Loftus-Cheek on that left side of a 4, because he's played left midfield for Crystal Palace. But can he do the full-back responsibilities? And a back 3 really requires that flexibility and adaptability, both sides of the ball. Lee, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think, like we talked about previously, about the back 3, one of those players being able to drive out of that position, and then finding players by bypassing the midfield through into the striker position, or maybe into those inside channels, and trying to find players who can, turn and create danger, which we know Jesse Lingard can do, Dele Alli when he's played, and Marcus Rashford. So there's a lot of potential for a potential change of shape, I must say.
And before we return to penalties, I know you've got an image of the penalties. If you're a Swedish analyst looking at England and studying the past 4 games in the World Cup, what areas of weakness then would they be looking at?
Got a young, vibrant squad. It's a cliche, the left side, and Lee came up with a great point of those natural left-footed players in wide areas. It sounds a cliche, 20, 30 years old for England, but because of Ashley Young's reluctance and fondness to come inside constantly, it actually, and this is Lee's quote, not mine, Lee said it shortens and narrows the pitch by 10 yards automatically. So that could be an area they look to exploit against us, and they may look to pin back Young or Trippier, but I don't think they are going to think. I think they're going to sit in and make it compact and possibly look to try and do us on the counter. They've got players like Forsberg in there, who's a fantastic player, by the way. Who's been critical for those who can launch attacks and do the other side of the ball. So it's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, I would agree with Paul. I think the counter attack's going to be our main problem. And I personally think, especially if they're playing a 4-4-2, which is very likely, the 2 wide midfielders with Forsberg, can he get in behind, Dele Alli? If we do play a 5 across the midfield, can he play in behind, or maybe behind Jesse Lingard, and try and expose and drag Henderson out of position to then find more space in the middle of the park? He likes to tuck inside a lot, so can he beat players with 1v1s? I think that's going to be massive for us. I think Forsberg needs to be carefully looked after by Henderson or by another midfielder, so even potentially a double pivot, just to make sure that he's not causing any damage, because he is a top talent.
Brilliant. So the game could potentially go to penalties then again if Paul's prediction of them sitting in is accurate. So Ben, I was reading your article from The Guardian earlier, and you had some nice quotes from previous managers. So Glenn Hoddle in 1998, you can never recreate on the training ground the circumstances of the shootout. Sven-Goran Eriksson 2006, when it comes to the pressure, we are not good. Then Roy Hodgson 2012, you can't produce the tired legs. You can't reproduce the pressure. So, so going back to Saturday's penalties, I know that you've said that penalties aren't a lottery. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're not. And Lee mentioned that the players have been training in a certain way, naming their spot and then trying to hit their target. And there are 2 ways you can take a penalty. One is called goalkeeper independent, where you pick your spot and you hit it as hard as you can. And if you get it right, the goalkeeper wouldn't be able to save it, which is essentially what all 5 of the England players did. The other way of doing it is goalkeeper dependent, where you slow down, you wait for the goalkeeper to make the first move, and then you kick it the other way, which is much harder technically to do, but actually over time is a more successful way of taking penalties. But only one player did that in the shootout. That was Luis Muriel, who also scored. So the England players, it was really clear. They knew exactly what they were doing. So they all had their routine. They had their run-up. Crucially, they waited an extra couple of seconds after they spotted the ball and after the referee blew the whistle. Because in the past, England players have the quickest reaction time from the referee blowing his whistle to say you can take the penalty to them actually starting their run-up. In the past, that reaction time has been 0.28 seconds, which is essentially a sprinter's reaction time running off the blocks. This time for the shootout, the average reaction time was over 2 seconds. There's only 2 seconds, but it makes all the difference because you're seeing the players take a deep breath, compose themselves, take control of the situation, and then strike a very, very good penalty. And that has been practiced on the training ground. They practiced the walk from the centre circle to the penalty spot. They practiced taking penalties after 120-minute training sessions. So they know what it's like to take a penalty when your legs are tired, when your body's tired, when your mind is tired. All these things seem really obvious, but they all add up to taking away some of the variables that will happen during a shootout. In the past, England players have been walking to the spot, literally not knowing where they're going to kick the ball. And when you're under pressure, the decisions you make are less good in every aspect of your life. If you're under pressure, you're not going to make a clear-headed decision. So what Gareth Southgate has done is talked about this for months, and he's got these players together. And 2 weeks ago, I have no doubt those players would have known whether they would be in the list of 5, 6 or 7 to be taking a penalty. And I have no doubt also they would know then where they would be kicking their penalty. So then they have all this time in training to work on that kick. So when they come to it, they're not going to be nervous and they're not going to be thinking, where should I kick it? Or I must not miss, which is also not a good thing to think just before you're about to take a penalty.
Is there such thing then as a perfect penalty?
The perfect penalty is the one that is scored.
The one that goes in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
where in the next should they
Paul
be?
showed his graphic, and Jordan Henderson's penalty is actually not that much worse than Eric Dyer's. You know, they're pretty much in different corners, but they're not that worse. There's not that much difference between them. Espina made a really good save for one of them and didn't for the other. So, who took the worst penalty? Well, the perfect penalty is the one that is scored, is what I would always say.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. I'm sorry, Andrew Williams is asking. So the goalkeepers now know pretty much where Kane is going to hit his next penalty. So he's had 4 penalties in the tournament now. Hard to the goalkeepers, right? He says. Does Kane change, or does he keep trusting the power, pace, and accuracy? Yeah, I mean, if he trusts it, it's still really, really hard to say. But he's taken 1 down the middle and 3 to his natural side. The first kick in the actual game against Colombia during open play was down the middle, and he does like that penalty as well. He actually takes that penalty quite a lot in pressure situations. He scored a penalty down the middle against Manchester City, against Arsenal, and against Liverpool. I was surprised that Ospina didn't wait a bit longer, because I thought if they'd have done a bit more homework, they might have known that for massive penalties, Kane likes to play it safe down the middle. But it's a very good option for strikers to go down the middle, because we don't often see goalkeepers stay down the middle. Each goalkeeper has the choice of left, right, and middle, as do the strikers. But goalkeepers stay central only 9% of the time, because they've told me they don't want to look like they're not making an effort. It's called non-action bias, but it is an active choice to stay central. So if Kane gets another penalty, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes central, because the goalkeeper might not want to risk staying there.
Ben, just on the goalkeeper stuff, sorry. I watched the penalties and I thought Pickford had gone to his right every time. It turned out he went to his left on 1 out of the 5. What's your thoughts on the goalkeeper? Because the law of averages, if you go to your right every time, states someone's probably going to hit it to the right or to the keeper's right.
Yeah, that's right. Unless the players detect that that's the pattern. And that's what was happening in the 2008 Champions League final. I think Van der Sar dived to his right every time, and Anelka went the other way. It's just constant bluff and double bluff. I always like it if a keeper stays central for one of the first 2 penalties in a shootout, because that then plants a seed of doubt in the future kickers' minds to say, hang on a minute, this goalkeeper could potentially stay in the middle as well. So maybe I don't want to kick it down the middle. And that reduces one of the 3 options. So you're always looking to find a percentage or an edge in that way. But even if the keeper goes the right way, if the striker kicks it as well as he should, it won't be saved. As we saw with Trippier, that was an unsavable penalty.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned, Ben, that you think that probably Southgate's been preparing them for the past 2 weeks, and they would have known in advance where they put in their placements. Did you see the video with Spain, Hierro, Diego Costa, and Koke?
Yeah.
So Costa was saying that he didn't want Koke to take the penalty, and that's his Atletico teammate as well. What type of impact can that have then on the morale amongst the players then just before they're about to take the penalty? And he was quite happy. I think he missed, not happy, but he was kind of like, I told you, straight after he missed the penalty.
Yeah, I don't think he was happy, but he was saying, I told you so. I mean, I think it is astonishing that you get to this stage of a major tournament and during the period after extra time, they're knocking around looking for volunteers. And that's what happened to Southgate as well. He only volunteered in 1996 against Germany because no one else stood up to say, I'll do it. And in that group was Paul Ince, Tony Adams, Steve McManaman, Darren Hamilton, far more experienced players in terms of caps, but also technically probably better players as well. But it was left to Southgate to volunteer. You don't want to be looking for volunteers at that stage of the game. And as I said, you don't always make clear-headed decisions when you're under pressure. For me, the job of a coach is to decide and to know the players better than the players know themselves. And the coach should know which players he wants to take a penalty because they are the ones that don't have the best technical ability necessarily, but are the ones that can cope with the anxiety the best, the ones that can perform under pressure. In 2006, the World Cup final, Marcello Lippi, the Italy coach, could have picked Francesco Totti, Luca Toni, or I think Cannavaro to take the final penalty for Italy. But he chose Fabio Grosso, right, who's a no-mark left-back. He chose him because he felt that he would react best to this pressure situation. And he did. He scored. So this is down to the coach's choice. And I would just urge all coaches who are facing a shootout scenario to take the responsibility and say, trust me in this. I will take some pressure off you guys. You will take the first kick. You will take the second kick. You will take the third kick. And if you don't like it and if you don't score, it's my fault for picking you. It's not your fault. It takes another layer of pressure away from these players. They've got enough pressure on them.
And Lee, so on that note about trust, I think we spoke before we came online as well. How much do you think that's... So Rashford took a penalty as well. I think he was the youngest of the penalty takers. How much do you think the trust that Southgate's put into the squad has helped them then get this far? And then, well, we'll see how far they get. But how much does trust in the players has got to do with it?
Well, like I said, I think before we went live, I think if we do what I want these guys to do, that big W word that I'm going to touch the wood again and touch it here again, is a case of that. I don't think it's through the technical abilities of the players because we're not as good as other nations. I personally don't think we're good tactically. I don't think Southgate's as good as other nations tactically. But what it will be if we do what I want us to do is the chemistry and the camaraderie and the ability to trust and believe in each other is to go on and do and go as far as we possibly can. And again, exactly what Ben said, exactly what Paul said, it's testament to Southgate. It is tournament football. In theory, it's, what is it, 6, 7 games? It's nothing. It's not a season. We know how good the players are in terms of technical qualities. We know they can understand direction. It's now about, can they psychologically do it? And can they trust each other to win football matches? And then just try and go as far as they can. So like I said, I repeat myself, it'll be down to camaraderie, down to chemistry. And again, that's down to Southgate.
At any point in that game when Colombia scored in the last minute, I mean, England fans must have been thinking, here we go again. I looked the extra time, and extra time is a real funny one. You know, it's do we go for it or do we cut our losses and go for the penalties? But they looked composed. They didn't play great in extra time, neither did Colombia, but they looked composed, and it was, again, similar to what Ben said about Southgate giving that pressure and direction and ownership of, you know, we've got a job to do. Everyone knows what we're doing. We're going to see it through. And if we go out, we go out. And if we win, we go again. And it's progress, not perfection. And England are progressing. So I think we've got to be happy with that as a nation.
I would add one thing to that in terms of the body language, which I noticed during the shootout itself. There was some footage shown of the England staff and bench watching with their arms interlocked when Kieran Trippier scored a penalty, and they were pretty much stayed exactly as they were and didn't get too overexcited. They were obviously keeping their emotions massively in check, which was a clear directive. They'd been told to do that. It was very obvious. They weren't getting overexcited when a penalty went in, and they weren't getting underexcited when a penalty was missed. And if you watch Jordan Henderson after he missed his penalty, he walked back to the centre circle. He was obviously disappointed, but he didn't cover his hands with his face or put his shirt over his head in embarrassment or humiliation. The first penalty kick that was missed in a World Cup shootout was in 1982 by a German player, Uli Stilicher, and when he missed, he fell to the ground on his knees and covered his whole face. He looked like a 3-year-old having a tantrum. And this kind of thing can have an emotional contagion that affects the rest of the team. And when Henderson walked back to the centre circle, his head was up. And honestly, if you hadn't known that he'd missed the penalty, you wouldn't have been able to tell whether he had scored or missed. And it's simply keeping your emotions in check and in control. Because missing a penalty in a shootout does not mean you've lost that shootout at that point. And as we saw, it wasn't the end of the world, luckily for Henderson. But this is a total change in how the England team are approaching every single detail. Even the body language of players that miss penalties, they have to just continue. We're still playing the shootout. The game is not over. So don't look defeated, because if you look defeated, it will give confidence to the other side.
I think just going off on what Ben said there, I think that's absolutely vital. But it's not only affecting game after game or penalty after penalty, it's affecting generations. I mean, my first England tournament, because I don't remember 90, 92 we didn't get there, 94 we didn't get there, 96 was the big one, and obviously it's sort of no coincidence that Southgate missed that penalty. But from then on, all I can remember from penalty takers who were English players is head in hands, distraught, couldn't cope with the mental side of the action. But exactly what Ben said is that he's brought a completely different game plan to the floor. And, again, it's just testament to Southgate and what he's doing with his squad.
And all those players who missed penalties in that generation, we remember them for their missed penalties, which is a shame because they were really good players. I think that if an England player misses a penalty in this tournament, I don't think it's going to mark the rest of his career like it has done in the past because of what Southgate has changed in this group. Because I don't think there's any more stigma to missing a penalty, because Southgate has said it's not a lottery. All we can do is try and practice, and if we miss a penalty, it's just because we didn't execute it enough. I still think he's going to take ownership of that missed penalty in a way that perhaps hasn't happened in the past. So I'm pretty relaxed about whether we win or lose, because I think there's so much progress being made from a mental side of from the mental approach to the game. And as both Lee and Paul have said, the leadership that Gareth Southgate has shown, the importance of building cohesion in the group that can often trump talent, that can get you further than pure talent, because this squad is probably not as talented as past England squads, but they've got something special there, which is a fearlessness, a freedom, a likability, a cohesion. All these things are intangibles. They're almost qualities that are above the shoulder rather than below the knee, but they can take you a long way, and we're all going along with it and really enjoying it.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, so that does bring us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you for joining me today, Paul, Lee, and Ben. So let's start then with Lee. So Lee, where can you be found on social media?
Yeah, you can find me at Lee Fleck, F-L-E-C-K, coach, or Lee Fleck coach. I'm only on Twitter, so you can find me on there on social media, and obviously through the coaching manual channels as well. Okay, Paul?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is @PaulBrightCoach. and again through www.thecoachingmanual.com and @coachingmanual on Twitter and @thecoachingmanual on Facebook.
Okay, great. And Ben?
My Twitter handle is @BenLytt, which is BENLYT, and I'm always happy to engage in sensible penalty debate.
And your book is available on Amazon, 12 Yards, yeah?
It is 12 Yards, The Art and Psychology of the Perfect Penalty. If the final goes to a shootout, yeah, well, hopefully it will go up the charts a little bit on Amazon. We'll have to see.